What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, give it my full review because I have finally beaten this game. It took almost a month, and I'm honestly glad that it took this long and I was able to kind of sit with it for as long as I did. I want to do one more video after this, or at least one more, where I want to just talk about the ending and spoilers and kind of my feeling on it. Because although the story is going to play a part in this review, I'm not going to go super in-depth just because there'll be other videos that do it. But you read the title, you see the thumbnail. This really is my game of the year. And I know we're only in the late stages of March. There's still many months to go. There's still many games to go. This beats the other games I've played so far. And I actually think it's going to be very, very hard to beat this game. Now, I want to explain why, and I hope you guys give me the benefit of the doubt to watch a good amount of this video to hear me out. This game is not perfect. This game has actually many flaws, okay? There's a lot of things here that I think they kind of reached for or expanded, and they didn't really need to. And I actually think it makes the game almost worse because of it. But the strengths of this game and the impact that this game has had even on me, and we'll talk about that, as we go, you really can't replicate that. And these kind of games don't, to me personally, do not come around often. They really don't. And so when a game does what this game has done to me, I think of it very highly, and I think it's going to stay around, in my brain for a very long time. Again, it has some faults, and maybe let's just start. What are the negatives of this game? Well, one of them is the on and off kind of visuals. Now, I'm not going to focus too much on it because, to be honest with you, it is the least of this game's problems when it comes to the weaknesses. It's no surprise, or it's no, you look at it, you watch it. There are times where it's just absolutely beautiful, okay? There's times where the characters are absolutely beautiful. There's the CG cinematics that they have in this game. There's a couple of them, just like there was in Remake. It is top of the class. It's really good. But there's also times where textures are non-existent, and you're looking at the characters, you're looking at Cloud and Aerith and Tifa in kind of the open world, and there is no texture, to their face. It looks very old, and it doesn't look improved from Remake in that, when that happens. It doesn't look improved. Now, again, to be flat out honest, this is not me, simping over Final Fantasy. This is me, and we've talked about this before, for graphics versus story or gameplay or characters. Visuals are kind of last on my list. I can put up with visuals if the game does something to me, whether, again, it is the gameplay or the story or these characters, and those things win out. So yeah, the game doesn't look great all the time. At its best, it looks phenomenal, but there are times where it's not pushing anything, right? It's not pushing any boundaries, and I think that's because they went too big. They really tried to go for it, and as I said, I don't think they needed to, because this goes to the second thing, and I do think it is the biggest weakness by a mile of this game, and that is the side content. Now, okay, we actually have to make a little bit of a mark here. What do I mean? Well, let's differentiate, right? There's side quests, and each quest is tied to a character, right? You'll bond with them, you'll have some cool dialogue, and, their bond will actually change with you once you do it. So those missions are actually pretty darn good. Leading into this game, I kept saying, about a month before it, I replayed Remake. And I love Remake, and I still love it to this day. A huge weakness with Remake is the side quests are not very good, okay? They're fetch quests, they're not very detailed or in-depth. They fixed that. They absolutely fixed that, because the side quests in this game are really good. There's plenty of them. They easily have the most variety of any of the side activities that you're doing, and that's fantastic. Now, the rest of it is the issue. Okay, if I were to say, again, the biggest weakness of the game, the radio towers, going to the towers and activating them and doing the world intel and all this stuff. There is good to be found here. I think in their quest to make the game big, they stumble upon something like Queen's Blood, which I think is phenomenal, and I lost my life to it. I spent many, many hours in Rebirth playing Queen's Blood, right? There's a lot of actually mini games in this game that are insanely good, okay? And Queen's Blood, I think, is the top of the class. And so that's the positive, or that's the good outcome of when you do something like this. The bad outcome is truly going back in time 10, 15 years. And that's the weakness. We always complain about the Ubisoft effect, right, where there's all of these things, and you think back to games maybe 10, 15 years ago in open world where it's almost like they don't trust us as gamers, right? They put in 50 of the same exact thing over and over just to pad it. And I've actually said this before with like Hogwarts Legacy. You don't need to do that. It's in my personal opinion. You don't need to pad the game just to make the game longer, right? Like, trust us that we can handle a slightly shorter experience or quality over quantity. I would have taken 5 radio towers, right, that work better than 25 or 30, right? And that applies for really all of the side, objectives that you can do in the world. Is there good things to be had there? Well, like I said, I think the world intel, like, there's some things that basically spin off into side missions of their own. In fact, Fort Condor, right, with the proto relic, like, that becomes a thing as each region gets unlocked, and it becomes a quest, and Fort Condor kind of gets infused to it, and then other things get infused to it. So they do make it work from time to time. They do kind of expand things, but I would say overwhelmingly, you just don't need to do it, okay? Now, honestly, beyond that, I don't really have any big negative to say. I think now we can start going through positives. I want to focus on the combat because then we'll kind of end with story and characters. The combat's so good, okay? I'm a big, big fan of how the game feels. I was a fan of how Remake played. I'm a fan of how this game played. I said, when I replayed Remake, I tried to get more into it than I ever did before. So, like 4 years ago when I played Remake, I didn't really know how materia worked, if we're being flat. Like, and I've said this before, I'm a newer age Final Fantasy fan. Like, I haven't played almost any of these games. But Remake, I went in, I gave it a try, I loved it, but I didn't really know, like, okay, well, do we have strategies? Like, am I supposed to make certain characters do certain things? And when I replayed it, I did it. And I think it was better because of it. Rebirth, I went in with that mindset. So, like, I had an idea of what I wanted each of these characters to do, to balance each other out, and to create parties that you can do in this game, right? And kind of shift and shuffle characters. And I loved it. I freaking loved it. So I think the strategy there was really cool. The materia is really cool. But just the combat itself, it's just so much fun to play as these characters. I said, back in Remake, Tifa's an amazing character, okay? But her character, playing as her, she's always been tough for me. And she's still tough in this game. However, I do like her. I don't think there's a really weak one. Maybe like Kate Sith was one that I just couldn't really get behind in terms of combat. But again, fantastic character. There are, I guess, characters I like playing more than others. But I think everybody got upgraded. And they were all, at the very worst, decently fun. Red 13, decently fun to me. Kate Sith, decently fun. But like Barrett, Aerith, these characters are legend. Yuffie is such a great character in terms of combat even. So I loved playing as these characters. And again, I think when a lot of people talk about this game, especially now, you're going to talk about, the major story decisions and the characters. But to focus on combat just a little bit longer and to give it extra, credit, the bosses. I don't know how many people talk about the bosses, at least for Rebirth, right? Like, or Remake. The bosses are so good. They're creative. They're clever. They're unique. They're challenging. They're a little bit different. They're, I guess, diverse in that way. Like, they do a really good job. It's you know where it's going, or like, the format of it, right? Because like you're doing missions, story missions have a similar kind of play out, and they're going to kind of end with a boss. So you can kind of see them coming, but the bosses are really, really fun to go up against. And they're challenging. Again, they require some strategy of bringing in the right characters or maybe shifting materia around. That's another thing this game will do, right, is sometimes just say, okay, well, now you're playing with Barrett, Yuffie, and Red 13, right? Like that's you can't, you're locked into that. And I like that. It either forces you to get comfortable, or maybe you already are and you're kind of just like leaning into it. I've seen people say they don't like those parts. I actually like them quite a bit. Like they give you, I don't know, like you play as Cloud so much in this game, and that's not a bad thing. I love playing as Cloud, but just when the game dictates and says, okay, well, you're going to be locked in with this, cast now, or, group of characters, is like, okay, I'll move some materia, make sure somebody's got a healing thing, because, if you go in with 3 people that can't heal, that might be a problem. I like it a lot. I like the strategy. So want to give the combat a huge praise because, I played this game for 60 hours, okay, almost 60 on the dot. It was slightly over 60, but I don't think I would have played it that much if I wasn't doing some of the optional stuff that a lot of that relies on the combat, okay? And like Queen's Blood, like I lost my life to, and, I mentioned those kind of mini games. That's a very big strength of this game. the sense of like journey and exploration and finding these things and I guess the amount that they're throwing at you. But that really leads to, I think, again, maybe the game's greatest strengths, and we'll say strengths as plural. Okay, number one, maybe the game's biggest strength, singular, is the characters, okay? I want to really emphasize this because I've even seen online, depending, I guess, on how you feel of the ending and some of the things that happen with the story. The story's good, and we'll talk about that in a second. This game is so character-driven, and I love that. I mean, I think this game kind of re-taught me that might be the most important thing to me. Now, like, they're video games. You're playing them. And again, I think it's got to have decent gameplay. Any game's got to have okay gameplay to get me through it. But really, I mean, I love storytelling. I love characters, okay? So in a game, even like a Life is Strange, when the gameplay is non-existent, the story and the characters of, say, Max as the main character, that can get me through it. I'm reminded of that every so often. You know, I think about Persona 5, and I think that's a legendary cast. The gameplay is phenomenal, but the cast is also just insanely good. So I'm reminded every so often that maybe the cast of characters is the most important thing to me, because this cast is unbelievably good. Like, and again, I think that is almost the universally agreed upon thing, whereas the ending is not. You know, you can have various things, but I've seen people say, hey, no matter what you think of it, this game made me love Aerith more than ever before, than even the original game. And I think that's true. I really believe that's true. I think these characters are so good. You're with them for so long, and in different ways than you were in the original, but they're just, okay, this game specifically, right? There's a lot of themes going on that we won't spoil, you know, the main, you know, the actual, like, integral things, but there is a theme of loss and acceptance and kind of getting through things, and it's throughout this entire game, right? These characters go through so much, and this game does a really good job of balancing serious and emotional with also kind of comical, in the same similar way as the Yakuza franchise. I would say not as silly, right? You think of Yakuza, it can get really serious, but it is like a weird drama thing where, and I love it. I love the Yakuza. In fact, I just got into that franchise in 2023, okay? But you think of that, and maybe you think of like the mission where they're all in like their diapers, right? Like, it can get that crazy. It doesn't get that crazy in Final Fantasy VII, okay, for Remake or Rebirth. It doesn't get that insane, but there are times where there's kind of this disconnect, and it's like, okay, well, Sephiroth, like, there are serious, you know, consequences coming or serious things happening, and you're sitting there playing a card game against people, right? Or things like a chocobo race, or when you're on the beach, and it's like there's this levity where it's not all serious. And so I guess that's what I mean, right? And I don't think every game can get away with that. In fact, most games can't. That's why I think Yakuza actually stands out, because it can balance insane and crazy and like this lightheartedness with also pretty serious stuff. And Final Fantasy, again, I think the extremes aren't as extreme in Final Fantasy, but they're there. And I really appreciate that. I think that makes it kind of unique. But generally, I believe this game is driven through the characters. I mentioned playing as them. And although Kate Sith is, say, my least liked playable character, he's a phenomenal. He's got so much depth. The talent of these actors, every single one of them, okay? From Sephiroth, you can go the villain side to the hero side. Everybody is so good, and I mean, I don't want to say everybody's so lovable, because some of them are not lovable, but they are exactly what they need to be. If you're supposed to feel for them, you're going to feel for them. Whether it's going through Barrett's, tragic, kind of background, or Tifa, or, I mean, really, like I said, a big thing with this game is you see a lot of where these characters came from, what they've gone through, and what they have to accept, and kind of, you can carry it with you, but you got to move on from it in a sense, right? You see that with everybody. Actually, there's an asterisk there. I won't go too much into it. Mostly everybody, right? But I really believe that's why it's driven by these characters, their relationship with each other. Tifa and Aerith, are always great characters, and they are together in Remake, and they're really good when they're together, right? In Rebirth, I think they just took it and elevated it. Where like this is a phenomenal relationship that I think anybody, any gender, any race for any of these characters, but I think you can look at it and say that's such a cool relationship. Aerith and Tifa have any of them, any of their kind of relationships with each other or individually what they bring, like Barrett's just his personality, or Red 13 and what he goes through, in this game, or Yuffie. Like, Yuffie's so good to play as, but she's also a really fun and I think necessary character to help balance out some of that cast, right? It's just, I can keep going, but I'm actually kind of thinking of maybe making individual videos for these characters. If you guys want to see that, let me know. But that's how good they are. You could actually make almost a 20, 30-minute video on each of them. That's the game's biggest strength, is these characters, the relationships with each other, what they go through, what they're about to go through. And ultimately, if you don't have great characters, then the story of what's happening to them, it won't really matter, right? Like something impactful could happen to a story or in a story, but if you don't care about the characters, it's not going to hit as much. Whereas, you need the good characters, and this game has it. In terms of the story, all right, and this is going to be non-spoiler. I'm not going to spoil it because, like I said, I want to do a whole video where we just kind of look at maybe the last 2 hours of the game. So there's no point doing it here. I love it. I love it. Now, I do want to throw in one thing. Because this is the middle, or kind of at least, right? Maybe it's not even the middle, but it's sort of in the middle of Final Fantasy VII, the original, okay? Because it's that, there are several parts to it where it feels not like fetch questy, but it feels like, okay, let's just get to this area well, actually, kind of. Actually, maybe that's true. Let's go to this area to learn just a little, and we'll have like one impactful cutscene. The rest of it is kind of like engaging gameplay that we'll do. And then it's just to get us to the next area. But I will say two different things, right? Number one, I mean, slight weakness because it takes a while for the story to heat up, right? There are moments where the story is incredible throughout. And like I said, these character moments are also throughout, and those are what stand out the most to me thinking about it back, okay? However, like I said, okay, it takes a little bit of time to go through, and it takes a while for the main story, so that's kind of a negative. But one thing I want to throw out, too, is it is a pro and con, but an inadvertent pro, and maybe it's not even inadvertent, maybe they planned on it, is you're really getting an in-depth look at this world that you're supposed to care so much about. Like, you got to think about the major themes of Final Fantasy VII, what's going on with the live stream, what's going on with the planet, what Shinra's doing, what Sephiroth wants to do, all this stuff, right? And to see it in this way, visually, but also to literally experience the different parts of this world, I think make you feel for it more. So in 7, you're stuck in which again, like, you're generally following the path of the original game, but say in 7 Remake, you're in Midgar, you are learning, but how much do you care about the world and the live stream that's in the world? How much do you care when you're only in one area? Well, this one, you go to the Golden Saucer, you go to Gongaga, you go to Costa del Sol, right? You're going to all these places. You're starting to learn, like, there's different people here. There are different regions. Some of them are more like touristy. Some of them are more like working middle class, or like working blue collar kind of thing, right? Where Tifa was born. And so, like, you get all of these different things throughout the game. And I think that helps. So although it does feel very, hey, go here just to kind of see what is there, and then it's just going to lead you to the next place. While there's not major story beats everywhere, or while they're maybe uneven in how impactful they are, there's the underlying message where it's like, hey, get to know this world. Look around, see why it's so important that we save it. And I think that's very powerful, and I think that's always there. And, again, I think that's obviously planned by them. But even if I do have negatives with the kind of fetch questy, in at least maybe the first 50, 60% of the game, while that is a negative, the positive is that underlying theme, okay? But like I said, when the game stands out, which is, I would say, for the first 60% of the game, maybe even longer than that, it's character-driven. It's the moments of Tifa. It's the moments of Red 13. It's the moments of Barrett, right? You go through a lot of that. And Cloud and what he's going through with Sephiroth, and Cloud with Tifa, and Cloud with Aerith, and all this stuff, right? That mainly drives at least half the game, if not more. Then when it gets to the major story parts, without spoiling it, I will say that I'm in. There is one issue I have with a certain thing that happens towards the end. One. But I can tell you without spoiling it, I honestly accept like what's been shown. Not that I'm just like sitting here bowing down and saying, oh yeah, I'll just accept anything you give me. I'm in it for the long run. Like I said, why is it my game of the year? Well, these characters are unforgettable, okay? And they'll stick with me for a long time, and their journeys will stick with me for a long time. But when I keep thinking about them, the characters, when I keep thinking about the story, and love it or hate it, love or hate those last 2 hours, I can't stop. And I mean, this is me, only me, but genuine. I can't stop thinking about it. I do that video essay, which took me like all day to do that one. But I like dreamt about it the night that I beat it. Like I can't stop. And you can call me maybe certain words because of this, but that's why it's my game of the year. As I said in the beginning of this video, this is a game that you might love or hate, last 2 hours. But I can tell you the story and where it's going, the theories and the confusion, because there's definitely some confusing elements to it, it stuck with me. And I'm not letting it go for like quite a while. I can imagine me thinking about this daily for a while. I don't know about 4 years, but I do think it's going to stick with me for a long time. And as I said, like other games just don't do that. It's very rare that a game comes out. Like I talk about Life is Strange almost like daily or weekly on this channel. 9 years later, it's a game that really meant something to me, right? Like did something to me. And Rebirth, Life is Strange, Sly Cooper, Uncharted. There's many franchises, but this game has done it too, where I can't stop thinking about it. It made an impact. I don't love everything. If we're just talking about the story, right? Like there was a beat that didn't hit me the way I think maybe it was intended to, right? But overall, I love it. It's controversial. It's confusing. There's a lot of theories. I love that. Maybe not the controversial part, but I love theorizing. I do love confusing stories. I'll be honest there. Kingdom Hearts, Alan Wake. These are games that BioShock, BioShock Infinite maybe specifically. I do like those kind of games. So maybe there's a biasness there that if your game is convoluted, I might actually like it more. But I don't know. I love the themes. I love what they did. I feel like I'm following them. There are different ways that they can go with this for part 3. But, we've speculated on some of that already, and I'll continue to. I love it. And, like I said in the beginning, like it's not a perfect game. That's the weird thing, but that's what and not to go on a rant in a Final Fantasy video, that's what I find so awesome about games and even just like subjective things. A game doesn't have to be perfect to stick with you, right? This game, I would never call a perfect game. It is too convoluted, maybe when it doesn't even need to be. Like I said, with some of the side stuff, it goes back actually versus going forward. They didn't need to do that stuff. It is absolutely not a perfect game, but it's an impactful game. More than anything else, the word to define this game to me is impactful. It impacted me, and it's going to continue, and it's going to stay with me for a long time. That's why it's my game of the year. And we'll see, because another game has to do that to beat it. Another game might have far better gameplay. It might have a better story, a literal, better written, better whatever. Maybe better characters, whatever. But it needs to make an impact on me for the rest of this year to beat Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And I actually don't know. I don't know. I'm going to give games a chance, but I don't know if there's any game out there that's going to be able to do that. We'll see. So hopefully I conveyed my thoughts to you the right way. You can, of course, let me know in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.